Right. Hello. Welcome back to Nearbound at Work. We took a week off, but other than last week, this is every Wednesday at noon. We're here to kind of dive in, sometimes diving right into the weeds and like literally walking through certain use cases for account mapping and pulling in Nearbound data. Um, Other times, a little bit higher level, kind of laying the strategic lattice work. And that's what we're doing today. If you missed 2 weeks ago, we did part one of Nearbound Marketing Playbook, where Logan kind of walked through the first three phases of the 5 phases of Nearbound Marketing Plan. That recording is available. You can find it on our YouTube channel. Really, like, man, I love this stuff because I was telling Logan before we started this call that what he put together is like what I've been trying to make time to do. Like, I just need time to sit down and like map out if you're talking about Nearbound, what does that mean for a marketing team? What does that look like? If you were to start from scratch from day one and think about building a marketing team and marketing motions around the reality that is the fact that we're in the who economy, that people are influenced by those they trust, probably more than they're influenced by your company. So you better figure out who they trust and start working with them. So that was a great session. We're going to dive in here. Logan, maybe you can do a really quick recap. And by the way, Logan is content guru, marketer, partnerships guy, former journalist. He's at Teamwork now, but he's been a podcast host of, I think, one of the most popular podcasts in B2B marketing. So like, he knows content marketing. He knows marketing in general. He knows partnerships. So I want to, for those who are joining for the first time, give that little setup for Logan before we dive in to the content
Thanks for the plug,
hand.
man. Thanks for the plug. Hope everybody who's been regular attendees on the Nearbound at Work series here had a good 4th. We were able to get the burgers off the grill before the rain came in and watch the fireworks after. So hopefully yours was great too. If you're not in the States, hope you had a great week last week, regardless, even though it didn't feature Isaac in the team. It's actually good timing too, Isaac, for those who follow me on LinkedIn may have already seen this, but I've actually made a transition. And I think my story here in the transition of my role at teamwork.com is actually evidence in the momentum around Nearbound marketing right now. So I had been serving for the last 9-10 months as head of partnerships at Teamwork, really leaning into the marketing side. And now I am moving into an evangelism and content marketing role that is essentially going to be owning our Nearbound efforts at teamwork.com. We're going to backfill our head of partnerships role. So if you know someone who's looking for a role in partnerships and building a newer program, let me know. But I think that transition is evident in what we've been talking about, right? Partnerships is not a department, it's a strategy. And now I'm taking partner-led approach, a Nearbound approach directly into the marketing team. So I'm infiltrating. And what we want to talk about here is phases 4 and 5, which really get me excited about Nearbound marketing. But to recap a little bit, we've been talking about this transition to the who economy, what that has looked like. Check out last week's episode on YouTube.
Logan, real quick, I gotta,
it,
when you were kind of giving the evidence that like, hey, the how economy, where people are like, how do I solve this? It's getting worn out and people are overwhelmed. I just saw today, Chris Walker from Refine Labs just posted about a study that came out from Metadata about paid ads. Yep. And he was like, if you boil it down, you can get leads. I think the leads was like 197 cost per lead or 50, something like that, 150, 200. Yeah. But then if you look at the quality of those
rate
leads,
of like 633 leads to get a closed won deal or something.
Yeah. And the closed one, it was $57,000 customer acquisition cost. If you look at trying to pay for leads through paid ads, right? So like, again, let's just go out there and spam everybody in mass with paid ads with like kind of the old playbook. It's dying. The attribution hasn't completely caught up because it's still attributing a lot of stuff, to just like whatever categories still exist. But when you ask buyers, this is what's been really interesting. I love asking sales teams, what are the reasons deals are closing? And when you hear the types of things buyers are talking about, it's like word of mouth, somebody I trust, the right place at the right time, the right person who influenced me, right? Like that's that's the stuff that's getting it done and that's actually moving the needle on, on the numbers. So anyway, I just thought that study was even more relevant.
Super timely. That was at the top of my feed this morning, or I either saw it because I have the bell notification on Chris Walker's content on LinkedIn. So really good call out there, man. We talked about this a little bit last week. Oops, let me get to my goodness. Okay, hold on. Google Slides versus here. There we go. Okay. So the other transition that's happening, the why nearbound marketing is so important right now. If we look back at the transition from outbound to inbound, right? HubSpot really evangelized this. We need to go from outbound, which is interrupting, to inbound, which is attracting. Put down the megaphone, pick up the magnet. However, there's diminishing points of return. Chris Walker's post, the metadata survey, all of that data just proves this. And why is that? It's because when you zoom out, it's not just your company, your magnet, your prospect. They're surrounded by all these other magnets. And by the way, they're not just your competitors. Justin Simon or Nick Bennett had a great post on this the other day on LinkedIn. Like, you're not just competing for the attention against your competitors. You're competing against the other things we have in our lives, the 3 hours they're spending on TikTok, the new Netflix series they want to binge. They are, finishing up Ted Lasso because they, didn't finish all the episodes in season 3 or whatever it was. Those sorts of things, right? So nearbound marketing is all about activating your evangelists who are closer to your prospect, leveraging the trust that they have, and leveraging the collective pull power of all of your magnets. So what we talked about as we break down the 5 phases of, if this is the reality, we're in the who economy, our magnets are getting weaker, we need to reach into the market and combine our collective magnets with people who are closer, not only closer, right, but have more trust. That is obviously a big theme of Nearbound. Have more trust with our target audience. How do we actually do that? We talked about phases 1 and 2, which is just good marketing, right? You need to define your ICP. What good is account mapping with folks and figuring out how much overlap you have if you don't know who are the best accounts for you, which are the ones that convert at the highest rates, which are the ones that stick around the longest with the lowest CAC and the highest LTV. You've got to get clear on that. And we talked about going beyond your typical demographics, get into the psychographics, get into the technographics, those sorts of things. In phase 2, establishing and documenting your POVs or your points of view, which in my mind are building blocks to your strategic narrative. You don't have to go hire Andy Raskin or someone for, 5-6 figures to develop your strategic narrative. We'll actually talk about here, as you activate your evangelists, you can work with them to create content in public, to live in market, and you can actually develop and refine your POVs as you're co-creating content. I think a lot of times in marketing, it's like, let's go over here, let's have the brainstorming session. What does our ICP care about? And then we come back and we, come to the market with all of this stuff. And it's like, yeah, the market had no influence on what we actually developed. With a nearbound approach, you can kind of do the basics in phase 2, but phase 4 can actually help you circle back to phase 2. In phase 3, we talked about the 3 personas I really think you need for a nearbound marketing team. These can be a mixture, or they can be in collaboration with people outside of the marketing team. But the 3 are journalists, content creators, and former buyers, because all of these 3 folks know how to live in market, find the stories, and be able to communicate the stories that are relevant to your audience. We talk so much in B2B marketing about storytelling. We don't talk a lot about story finding. It's like, but in that example, we all know about it. I was just talking about, like, we go off into a dark corner with the marketing team in this brainstorm session. Then we come back, right? And we're like, we have a great story to tell. And our market doesn't care about that story, right? Versus going into the market with your evangelist closer to your target audience, finding what are the stories, and then working with them to then do that great storytelling. And I think that journalists know how to do that, right? A columnist can, if you compare kind of to in the journalism industry, a columnist, hey, this is what I think. These are our points of view. These are our opinions. a journalist is going out and finding the stories and comparing this versus that. We won't get into a debate over whether modern journalism is actually objective or balanced or any of those things. But in theory, it should be, right? It's going out there and finding those stories and comparing and holding up one idea against another. And so those are some of the building blocks as we get to phase 4 and 5, where we'll spend most of the time today talking about how do you activate your evangelists, and then how do you prep for scale after you have an initial iteration with your evangelists. Isaac, anything you want to call out there as we kind of recap from last week and head into phase 4?
No, I think you did a great job there. The phases 1 and 2, I just would throw in there. And if you watch the previous one, we went into this a little bit. Even though they are primarily like well-known, good marketing practices, there's still little differences when you bring a nearbound approach to them. Especially as you mentioned, like learning from those buyers' trust as you develop that POV, right? And like tapping into some of that nearbound knowledge, if you will, from those who surround your buyer. Like if you just imagine all of these things you have in mind, a picture of your buyer at the center and all of the, sort of orbiting planets that have gravitational pull around them, all of the nodes that influence them. And if you kind of map that out mentally, who are all of those? Some of those are people I'm partners with. Some of those are my customers. Some of those are, who are all of those, and how many of them do you have some context with? That will help in every step of the process, just keeping that front and center. But no, man, excited to dive into activate and iterate. It's a good alliteration there. Activate and iterate.
Activate and iterate. My and Isaac's design skills are only rivaled by our rapping skills. Just so everyone knows.
How did you know?
You were here last week, and you've seen a little bit of this. This is as far as our design skills go, but hopefully the conversation carries the weight. So there are actually 5 steps to activating your evangelist. You don't get to actually activating them until step 3 within this phase. So first, identify, which is what Isaac, great segue, man, right into this. You've got to look into the market, look at that visual of who's closer, who's in market, who's close to the audience, where is there already trust. Start to evaluate them. I've got some thoughts I want to share on that. Would love to hear your thoughts if you have, a counterpoint, or hey, we're missing something in the evaluate step, something like that. Then we get into activate, distributing with them. It is important that even though step 4 in phase 4 is distribute, and there is a little bit of, hey, I'm activating this evangelist as distribution channels for the content. I want to make sure that we don't kind of take the old playbook and just apply it to the new one. It's like all of these evangelists are just new distribution channels. And then we start to treat them like a channel. We start to treat them like, hey, we're just trying to hack their algorithm or their feed. How can we get the most bang for our buck? I think that's important, but you do want to activate them and distribute with them. And then you're selecting from there. So let's talk about identifying your evangelist. We alluded to this a little bit earlier. And this, to me, as I started hosting weekly episodes on Marketing Together, they drop every Friday. If you're not already subscribed to that show, check it out. But I just started with this premise of, where are there stories of marketing together? Where are there stories where marketers are saying, hey, we're marketing with, and then fill in the blank. And to me, it started to seem a little random, a little disparate, because we had episodes about marketing with your employees, like turning SMEs into thought leaders, marketing with your executives. Dave Gerhardt wrote a great book that I'm a big fan of called Founder Brand, activating your founder or your CEO as an evangelist. We talked about bringing in strategic advisors. It's been a cool trend, right, to bring in advisors, which that term can mean a lot of different things in B2B SaaS, but kind of bringing them in the fold a little bit. And how do you activate them with your marketing? Obviously, strategic partners, integration partners, agency partners. We've touched on that both on Marketing Together and on Partner Up. But then we started talking about like marketing with your customers and content creators and influencers. So it's like, Are we talking about personal brands? Are we talking about partner marketing? Are we talking about influencer marketing? Are we talking about customer advocacy? And to me, Nearbound marketing brings in a lot of those things that are actually a very similar motion, but they've been handled kind of one off over here. We got affiliate marketing over here, different influencer play here, customer advocacy doing something here, employee advocacy over here, right? Nearbound takes some of the good from all of these things and brings them together. So as you're looking at evangelists, it's your partners, but it's also, you have kind of two groups. You have internal and external evangelists. Now, how you approach them, how you incentivize them, how you work with them will vary a little bit, but bringing them together is also going to help your team live in market, because each one of those evangelists has a different view, a different perspective on the market, and a different level of trust with the market. So as we think about identifying the evangelists, think about internal, external, and some of these are some of the evangelists that have just kind of surfaced as I've been having these conversations on marketing together. If you have another type of evangelist that's not listed here, drop it in the chat. Let us know where is this maybe incomplete? Where is there maybe another type of evangelist that we're missing here?
Logan, what I think you may have went over this before, but content creators versus influencers, how do you think of them differently?
I would say there's a lot of overlap here. Content creators, if they're a good content creator, they have influence. To me, influencers would maybe be the speakers, the authors. Maybe they don't generate a ton with their social media following. They don't have a bunch of subscribers on YouTube or even a lot of followers on LinkedIn. But if you were able to get them to an event, or they're doing speaking engagements, they would draw a crowd there. So that's where I think there's kind of some overlap, but a little bit of distinction. Content creators, maybe, I mean, you and I were talking about this in this strategy. We'll get to it as we talk about creating and distributing. You have kind of your always on co-creation on social with your evangelists that we're going to talk about. And then you have your lightning strike moments. I think the influencers can play a bigger role in the lightning strike moments that you're doing once a quarter, maybe one big one once a year. And the content creators can more be focused on co-creating and co-distributing content on a regular basis on organic social like LinkedIn.
Yeah, great comment by Ward, saying friends and family as well. And that's great. And that's where I think about influencers in some ways is almost like, hey, here's a bucket of any other people who influenced your buyers that are not captured by some of these other, maybe more tightly defined types of evangelists that you've listed here. So like, maybe there is think about like Jeff Bezos. Okay. Mm-hmm. Is he a content creator? Not really.
No.
If he's not an advisor to your company or an employee or an exec, and you're not, partnering with, I mean, maybe you are a partner with AWS or something, but that's not really him. But imagine
we're an AWS partner. Jeff Bezos is our advisor.
Yeah. But imagine if somehow you knew through a contact of a contact and you could get Jeff Bezos to just say one good thing about you to one key account, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that's kind of there's an idea here that there are people that have influence. Maybe they're not even as big a name as Jeff Bezos in the world at large, but they have influence over your buyer. And even if it's not like content creation, public campaign, there's a way that you can tap them at the right moment with the right thing, that will push that forward. One other thought while you're on this slide, when you see this list, sometimes it's easy to be like, okay, so I got to go figure out how to get all these different types of people who influence my buyer to basically like do things for me, to influence my buyer for me. Yep. Boy, that seems really hard. Like, it's hard enough to incentivize my employees to try to like whatever, create content or, whatever it might be, advisors, execs. One thing I love about the ones that have the word partner after them, this is why it's a great starting point, because a partnership means that there is something that has been formalized. There's some kind of formalized agreement. And again, we talked about before how you don't have to have formal partners and you got to surround your buyers with all kinds of things, but that can be a nice place to start and to strip it down even further from there and to like crawl, walk, run. Like, let's start with the smallest possible. Is there one partner? Do we have one integration partner that we get along really well with that I can work with to help influence one buyer or subset of buyers this month. And if I can learn to do that, then can I sort of repeat that and expand out? So like sometimes just stripping it down and saying,
Yep.
who's the most likely to want to help me? Well, anyone where there's a formal agreement and there's already some reciprocity there is
Yeah.
probably a good place to start, because it's not, you don't have to go sell them, brand new, if you already have some kind of partnership in place.
That's a really good call out, man. And I would say even stripping it down from there to start with your MVP in this situation. We're going to talk more about this, but I think that really key to Nearbound marketing is activating personal brands of all of these different evangelists. So maybe you have a strong relationship with a partner, but getting them to commit to co-creating content on a company to company level with something that's super formal and that sort of stuff. It's like, oh gosh, I got a really good relationship with Isaac over here, but getting a lot of commitment and that sort of stuff from the whole team, like that's going to take more. What could I do with Isaac specifically? And
Yep.
just and go and run, and hey, who's one person who's willing to involve in this regular rhythm of co-creating content, distributing together on a regular basis on social. I'm going to talk a lot about LinkedIn, but it might be other channels. So go where you already have some established relationships, something formalized, and then make it very easy for them. And if you go to the individual level, it's often easier. And I just think that that's actually key to this strategy anyway. You want to activate personal brands and individual evangelists, not just another brand that's going to advocate for your brand. There's some value in that, but the individuals on that other side. Example of this with our live stream series at teamwork.com. I went to Pete Caputa at DataBox to be a speaker on our live stream series. I didn't go to his marketing team and say, hey, here's a co-marketing plan. I was just like, hey, Pete, will you come and speak on this? And then we'll give you some clips and then we'll distribute it and that sort of stuff. So definitely good shout there. So before you get to really activating your evangelists, you've got an idea of who to start with. Now you want to evaluate who are the right folks to start with here. I agree with Isaac that you want to start small. You want to start where there's already some buy-in. There's already a little bit of feeling of reciprocity. But you can start to kind of build this list of like, these are all the potential Nearbound evangelists that we could activate. And then you can start to sort, filter, prioritize from there. Two great tools. Like if you're going to look at where are the folks where we have account overlap and audience overlap, obviously on the account overlap, Reveal is perfect, tailor-made for this, right? Also looking at tools like SparkToro that can help you look at who are my buyers following, where are the content creators, what are the podcasts, what are the YouTube channels. SparkToro lets you do, even on their free platform, some really great searches to identify where are people following others already online. Obviously, that gives you an indicator, hey, there's some trust over here in the market that I could tap into. So I think Reveal and SparkToro are two great tools to start to evaluate your potential evangelists. Obviously, if there's a complementary product, but also a complementary narrative. And you might still be figuring this out. We've got an episode dropping soon on marketing together with JK Sparks, head of marketing at Audience Plus. And they did a 3-stop tour on efficient growth. And he explained how they partnered with 2 other brands that are talking about building an owned audience that are very complementary, and their narrative really complements. It's not just the product, it's a complementary narrative. So I think that that is another place to start. If you're kind of building like a matrix of kind of grading, like where do we have the most overlap? Okay, 5 out of 5. Where do we have the most audience overlap? 4 out of 5. Complementary narrative. Okay, it's 2, right? You might have somewhere there's a lot of overlap, but the narrative doesn't really fit. So I think maybe creating a grading scale of 5 on each of these could be helpful. Where do you already have a complementary relationship? Or where could you have a complementary relationship? Isaac, I think I was talking to Jared about this the other day, and one of the things you guys were doing, I forget which, so much going on at Reveal and Partner Hacker right now, but like thinking about not just where does someone else have reach that I can tap into, but where do we bring in complementary abilities? Maybe they have a bigger database, they have more reach, they have more followers on social, but we can bring some of the content creation because we've got a great video producer. We've got, a content team that kills it. And so we can bring that and say, hey, you've got this database, we've got these skills. If we put them together, we can bring better content to more people. And there's a win-win there. That could be something that you recognize. Ding, ding, ding. There's a 5 out of 5 on that. And then I think, as we talked about here, their willingness to be personally active on social. Key to the Nearbound marketing strategy is activating personal brands on social. So how can you look at that? Because I think the willingness is a key factor here. So you want to evaluate, you want to prioritize, but I actually stole this phrase from Isaac. Don't skip permissionless marketing. Like in that example I was talking about, I didn't go to Pete Caputa and like pitch him on this idea of being involved in our Nearbound marketing approach and like all this commitment from day one and just like get on one knee and propose for him to be one of our Nearbound evangelists. But I was like, hey, we got this thing going on. Can you do this? We can actually structure it around content that I saw you post on LinkedIn the other day, make it very easy for him. And now there's some trust built, there's a working relationship that then we can build on. So as much as you want to pause and evaluate, don't be afraid to just get in and start co-creating with some of these evangelists to kind of feel each other out. You might find that, man, they're really not willing to follow up. They just want to show up, do their thing. They're not going to help co-promote, those sorts of things. It can actually help you in your evaluation if you're willing to do some permissionless marketing with some of those.
Man, that's such a great point, Logan, it's almost like the evaluation and the execution. Sometimes you can just do them simultaneously where you're just doing some kind of small permissionless stuff. You're giving some shout outs to somebody you think you might end up wanting to partner with, or you're asking them to come on your podcast, and you just kind of see, is it easy? Do you work well together? Do they seem just as excited about the conversation they had with you as you did? Did they post about it on social without you even asking? Like, you can sort of start to check some of these boxes by dipping your toe in the water and experimenting a little bit. So that's a really great point. Very type A, like plan oriented people want to wait before they even approach anyone till they have checked off every box and hey, I've run you through my 10-point review process and you seem like you might be a good fit. Should we partner? Right. And it's kind of like, you wouldn't approach a dating relationship that way. You kind of you start chatting a little bit, right?
Yeah. For anybody who's been in partnerships and working, in anything ecosystem for a while, like you've got to bring that mentality of we're not building a system, we're tilling a garden. Right. And I think that applies to Nearbound marketing as well. So as we move from selecting, as you look at your different types, you start evaluating and prioritizing. Now it's time to really start activating your evangelists. So you got to think about, how am I going to approach them and pitch them, right? That can be easier if you've done a little bit of kind of permissionless marketing to start. Setting the expectations with them, outlining your incentives. Are you going to do some sort of formal paid partnership? Or are you going to look at this as, hey, we're going to be both equal parts? And so based on the expectations, like we think we'll grow our audience like this, you'll grow it like this. So there's not necessarily an exchange for that. But other times there might be, even with your internal employees, as I've been talking with folks on Marketing Together, going from kind of old school employee advocacy. Here's a platform. Here's all the content. Hit post on this, hit repost on the company page. As people are starting to wake up to the fact that that doesn't work, we need to activate our employees as part of this Nearbound motion and activate them as Nearbound evangelists. It does take more. It's more effective. So you got to think about how you're going to incentivize them at the same time. Co-creating, we're going to spend a good bit of time here in just a couple minutes and go deep here, because this is probably the area that I'm most passionate about and want to give people some easy wins and some cool tools that you can do this even if you have a small marketing team. But don't forget about encouraging and educating. I've got a screenshot here of one of our solution specialists. So at teamwork.com, this falls under, employees who are being activated as a Nearbound evangelist, sharing content on LinkedIn. And then the screenshot below, we use Teamwork Chat versus Slack, but think about a Slack channel that is Nearbound Evangelists, where people can drop their posts when they're posting, not to kind of do the hacky engagement group sort of stuff of like everybody like it early, because that can actually hurt your engagement. But like when a post turns into an opportunity that she passed to sales, she's able to say, hey, this post turned into this, and everybody's able to celebrate that. Also, like I can see someone else who posts in our Nearbound channel and say, hey, your hook really sucked on that. Let me rewrite it for you. Maybe I'd soften it more than that. People who know me know I won't be that blunt, but that sort of encouraging as well. And then we're dropping resources to educate folks. Like as I see, a carousel from someone on like update on the LinkedIn algorithm, I can drop that there. If I add a new video to our LinkedIn Legends course that I created for our sales team, I can let people know in that channel as well. So don't just think about, hey, we got to go out, select the evangelists, kind of vet them, activate them, and then turn it on and let them run. If this is going to work, there has to be some trust that you continue to nurture with your evangelists, and encouraging them and educating them is a big part of that. And a simple shared Slack channel is a great way to do that. So everybody can see the momentum. What are people posting? How can we get better? Let iron sharpen iron in that context, and have it be a place to celebrate the wins as well.
Love it.
Awesome. So activating your evangelists, I think there are a few. This might sound counterintuitive. For 4 years before I stepped into my first partnerships role, I helped lead a podcast production agency. And I think everybody has this idea that, we talked about at Sweetfish, and is helpful to create more content. If you start with a pillar, like a live stream series like this one, or a podcast, that can be tailor-made as a forcing function to create a pillar piece of content and then slice and dice that into a lot of micro content for social. Where I think that can be tough, especially as you're bringing more people into the fold, and now you've got more complexity, more people to involve, all that sort of stuff. My advice would be, if you don't already have an existing pillar piece of interview-based content, like a podcast, a video interview series, or a live stream, start with a regular rhythm of doing interviews, but you don't have to do it with the goal of getting people to show up to that thing, or getting people to even listen to the whole thing. So in my mind, it's like, oftentimes, especially smaller marketing teams, like they like this idea of bringing different people in. Obviously, a podcast is tailor-made for networking and for co-creating, but then you spend all this time, what are we going to name it? What's the outro going to be? The CEO wants input on the music, all that sort of stuff, right? No, you can use these 3 tools that I use in my toolkit all the time: Riverside.fm, Descript, and Canva, to do this same sort of repurposing you would with a published interview series, but just do the interview. Don't worry about publishing them. Just focus on the micro content, because you can go further, faster. You can iterate. You can find out what of this micro content is working well, and have that feedback into your POV refinement, as we were talking about earlier, and get some quick wins. So what this might look like is, let's say you start with 3 evangelists. You identify, someone who's an individual at one of your agency partners. You've got someone on your executive team, and then you've got maybe a solutions consultant, an internal SME, like we were sharing from our example from teamwork.com. Set up regular interviews with them, like first Friday of the month, second Friday of the month, third Friday of the month. Book an hour and a half with them. Ask some questions of them. If anybody wants some great leading questions to get content from these evangelists, hit me with a LinkedIn DM, and I will share with you a framework that I've got for POV discovery. But you can also look at, like, where's some of our pillar piece of content that I can just have these evangelists speak to. Like with Reveal, big pillar piece of content right now is the Nearbound guide, or the ultimate guide to Nearbound sales, right? Having those different evangelists just say, hey, I noticed this in the guide. Isaac, can you explain this? Or Jared, can you give me an example of this? That you don't have to worry about publishing that full interview, but from an hour, you could get 10 video clips, right? That then you could turn into 10 text posts on LinkedIn, that then you could turn into 10 carousels for LinkedIn. All of a sudden, you've got 30 pieces of content just for that one evangelist. Now you got 3 evangelists, you've got 90. oh, geez, we're posting 3 times a day on LinkedIn through these different evangelists. And I didn't have to worry about promoting a podcast, getting people to sign up, getting people to show up. So that's why I kind of paused, because I'm like, I really believe in like this pillar piece of interview-based content, slicing and dicing that into micro content. But do yourself a favor, if you don't already have that series established, just start with that rhythm of interviews and focus on the micro content. That might actually help you create the new pillar piece.
Well, you get to really expand your influence, your reach, experiment, field test with some different people, and bring together a lot of the things you started with in the first phases. So, like your point of view. Say you've got your point of view, and then you're looking at, you've got your ICP and your point of view, and you're looking at who influences these people. You can go out and even in 10 minutes, you can pull in that journalistic style, leverage that sort of journalist and say, hey, so-and-so, can I get 10 minutes with you? I just want to ask you about this study I just saw, or I want to ask you about, and it's something that is relevant to your point of view. And you kind of know, given what that person's all about, I bet I'm going to get in 10 minutes, a couple little clips or quotes or things from them that I can use to influence my customers by saying, look at what this person just said about this thing that just happened. That ties right into our point of view. And you are pulling from all these nodes of influence to help create your message without needing to go to them and say, will you guest write something for me? Will you co-market an event with me? You don't even have to say, can you book a full hour on a podcast with me and we'll figure out what to talk about? It's literally like, I'm a reporter. I'm putting together a little story. I want to ask you a question about this one thing that I saw. And you can, and then it allows you to pull in so many voices. We've done that a lot at Partner Hacker over the last year and a half. And really effective. It's surprisingly easy to get people, because it's flattering. If someone comes to you and they're like, I want to write an article about something cool happening in the market, will you give me 10 minutes to just riff on your thoughts? It's like, sure.
To take the journalism analogy further, think about like your local news reporter. They're putting out content every single day for the evening news, right? And how do they do that? It's because they just take the microphone. They go to like, something just happened. Like out here in Colorado a couple of weeks ago, we've been having some nasty thunderstorms. Hail hit out at Red Rocks, that amphitheater that's kind of famous out here in Colorado, outdoor amphitheater concerts there. And like, I don't know, don't quote me on this, but like tennis ball, at least golf ball size or bigger hail started coming down on people. What does a journalist do? I have this event or this thing, right? Now I'm going to go interview people. What was it like? Where did you find shelter? All that sort of stuff. They get content on a daily basis just by going into the places where their audience, which is people who are consuming that local news, where they are, where they're living, what's happening. And they're just connecting. This thing happened. You might have a take on it, and they put the microphone in front of them. Now, sometimes you get, stupid clips and all that sort of stuff, right? We can make fun of the local news a lot, but the point is they're able to create more. They're able to get people to contribute by just putting a mic in front of them. It flatters them, right? How many times has it been like, oh, I was on the local news, everybody sit down, right? At least, before everything was on demand and DVR.
But I think the key distinction when you're a marketer is like, you're not going and saying, hey, let me grab somebody and say nice things about my product, right? Like you can ask them to go review you on G2 if that's what you want. If you stick to the narratives and the point of view that you're trying to get across to the market, now you have access to all kinds of people, because you're not going and asking them to put their name on your product. You're just asking for their insight or opinion on something that's relevant
on the trends in the market that tie to your narrative. So so basic tool set here, use Riverside.fm, a couple dozen bucks a month. You can record interviews, very high quality. Descript, even if you're not an experienced audio or video editor, gives you a transcript that you can use. You can literally edit the words in the transcript, and it edits your video. Like, you don't need to be an experienced video editor to create video content with your evangelist. And I think video is actually a big piece of this, right? Because then you're putting faces out there with the content. Faces elicit trust. We connect with humans. It's why YouTube thumbnails get more clicks when there's a big face and larger eyeballs, right? And then
I have to work on making my eyes bigger.
We both kind of lean in. People are like leaning back from their laptops right now as Isaac and I lean in. And then Canva, if you spend any time on LinkedIn, you see that carousels really pop, but they're pretty labor intensive typically. One thing you could do with this model is I do an interview with Isaac I've identified 10 clips. I bring them into Descript, optimize them for LinkedIn. Then I take the transcript of that clip and then I spread that out over a carousel. Canva dropped a new feature called bulk create. So any of, the older millennials like Isaac and I remember mail merge. So cool in Microsoft Word. It's basically like mail merge for Canva. So you can take your template, say, I have these 20 things that I copied from my Descript transcript into a Google Doc, and then have that mail merge that across different slides within your Canva carousel. So even if you just start there, there's a ton that you can do just by identifying 3 evangelists, interviewing them once a month, and creating micro content, not worrying about the promotion of a big series or something like that. So Isaac, my teleprompter that I use as my screen is, the chat's a little small. So if you want to pause on anything you're seeing in chat, let me know.
Oh, cool.
But I'll
No,
keep going here.
Andrea from my team just said you can even just have a catch up session with your evangelist. Just record it, trim it, and there you go. So
yep. Awesome. So as we start to think about distributing, we alluded to this earlier. There's a few different ways you can think about distributing with your evangelists. I think distributing with is the key here, not distributing through. They're not a channel. They're nodes of trust. And so you have to establish and maintain that trust with your evangelists if you're going to go to the market and say, you can trust us together, right? So organic social, we just kind of laid out the starting point of that. Have that regular interview series, daily rhythm of organic content going out. Something we talked about with Zoe Hartsfield on Marketing Together would be more of these lightning strike moments. And this is something that I was giving Isaac, genuine kudos on to the Partner Hacker team before we hopped on here. The Partner Hacker team does a great job of creating regular content with folks in their network, but also like, hey, here's this big lightning strike moment where we're gonna put a lot of concerted effort. And so this might be, hey, there's something specific, like we're bringing all of these things together and we're going to make a big announcement, or we're going to tie them together. We're going to release something that gives people a framework or something to act on the things that they've already been hearing. So one, you've kind of primed your audience to be ready for it to lean in and be like, oh, how are they going to make this even easier for me to act on the content that they've been sharing? Internally, what you do is you can take a lot of those micro pieces of content you've been using for your organic social, start with a Google sheet and say, okay, we have this carousel, we have this video clip, and create like 3 lines, 3 rows in your spreadsheet for each piece of content. And then start to get together everybody who's going to take which one. Okay, I'm going to post this one at this time. Track that all in a Google sheet, because I think this is where this approach can be different than your typical employee advocacy. Typically, like it's, hey, here's a Google Doc, here's some copy, here's some graphics, here's the UTM link. Everybody please share it. If you want to activate your evangelist, one, you're working with a smaller group, so you have more opportunity to be like, Isaac, can you do this, this, and this, right? Jared, can you do this, this, and this? You get the buy-in, but also structure it. And I think, obviously I work for a company that sells a project management platform. As much as I want to say, whatever PM tool you're using, like bring everybody into that, use the least common denominator. Like just start with a Google Doc and a Google Sheet of what people are going to do, what times they're going to post, who's going to post what. Another hack that Zoe dropped from that episode that is applicable here is writing copy for them that's like 80% of the way done. So if you create this list of all the different assets, and let me repeat again, don't use just each asset once, right? Like if you have a 1-minute clip, there's no reason that Isaac, Jared, Aaron, Admiral, like everybody couldn't post that with slightly different copy at different times. You can vary it up. But what she was saying is write copy that's like 80% of the way done. Like, hey, here's the copy to go with this clip or this carousel, but like, here are the variables where you can insert something and give them some prompts, because that way it's not just the exact same content that's going to be squashed by LinkedIn's algorithm, but you make it easy for your evangelist to do something that you've got already 80% of the way done. Something new to contribute to this that is, I think, really exciting is LinkedIn Thought Leader ads. As you're creating this micro content with your evangelists, and let's say you're distributing them on LinkedIn, you can now go into your LinkedIn Campaign Manager and and boost those posts just like you would company posts and put spend behind it and track them similarly. So I think that's a new opportunity and maybe a way around this. If you're like, hey, we're working with this advisor or this content creator, like create a role for them in the company of advisor or nearbound evangelist, right? And they add that to their work history, their experience on LinkedIn. Now you can boost posts of theirs that go out. So super tactical there, but something that I think you can do. And then you can look at how does this feed into our other content channels, YouTube shorts, newsletters, events, but starting with that daily rhythm of organic social that's coming from those week or monthly interviews with your evangelist is just a great foundation to lower the barrier. So let's talk about tracking, because I was talking with Ethan Butte the other day. He's chief evangelist at BombBomb. He's host of a show called Chief Evangelist, and he's talking about evangelism, both internal, external, and as you've heard me say, like your evangelists are everything in a nearbound marketing approach. And he was telling me a lot of times with this approach, you're not always going to get proof. You're going to get some evidence, but it's not always going to be exact proof. To Isaac's point earlier, the attribution models just aren't there. So what can you do to gather some of that evidence for yourself to see if it's working and to share with your leadership, to show at least, hey, there's indicators here. At some point, there's going to have to be some belief from the leadership team, even if everything isn't quantifiable. But here are some things you can think about tracking, both quantitative and qualitative. So again, with nearbound marketing and activating your evangelists, you're bringing in different things that are already happening. Maybe you already have like a partner stack, or you're already using UTM links with HubSpot or your marketing automation platform. Like, make sure that you're using those sort of trackable links with your evangelist when they're sharing content and driving back to a landing page, another offer, a sign up for your live stream series. Like, just do that. It's just smart marketing. Takes a little bit more work because you've got multiple people involved. But again, organize that in your project management tool, a Google Sheet, something like that. Shield is a great tool, very effective, especially for looking at LinkedIn analytics across a team. So let's say you have 5 evangelists, it can group them all together and see how many impressions did we have, who's gaining in follower count. And so you can report back kind of on the aggregate without having to say, oh, Logan, how many views did you get on that post on Wednesday? Okay, it was 2,500. Isaac, you had 5,000 on this one, and having to manually gather all that data. Shield can help you move a lot faster here. Obviously, if you're using LinkedIn Thought Leader ads, look at LinkedIn Campaign Manager for paid social. And then Hockey Stack is one that I've been hearing a lot of people talk about as far as attribution, especially when it's not direct conversion and you're doing LinkedIn ads. So those are kind of my 4 go-tos on the quantitative side. On the qualitative, this goes back to something Isaac was saying, like, you guys have just started asking your sales team, what's winning deals? What are people saying? So I didn't even have this on here, but number 1, forget my 3, start with number 1 that Isaac said, ask your freaking sales team. 2, if you're using a sales call recording tool like Gong or Wingman or something like that, you can oftentimes set up trackers. So let's say, you've got 3 evangelists, and sorry, no one else's name is coming to mind. So we're going to use Jared, Isaac, and Logan. Set up trackers. You can set up a tracker in Gong that says Nearbound Evangelists. And you can literally say every time Logan, Isaac, or Jared is mentioned, have that trigger. Now, will you maybe get some false positives? Sure. But you can literally go there without even bugging your sales team and hear when your prospects are mentioning the names of your evangelists, right? If you're bringing them into a live stream or webinar series or podcast series, put the name of the podcast in there, right? Like an example here might be, reveal I'm partnering with them to host Marketing Together, put a tracker in Gong that says Marketing Together. That is also one of the things that rolls up to that Nearbound Evangelist tracker. Self-reported attribution. I put a screenshot here from Refine Labs because they're really the ones who have evangelized this idea of it's messy, it's dirty data, quote unquote, but asking that question, how did you hear about us? And leaving that open text, you will be very surprised at how often people will say, this evangelist, this event, this podcast with so-and-so, and they will tell you, right? Even though the attribution might model might say it was a Google ad or it was direct search, those sorts of things. And then that Nearbound channel, we talked about that as like the place, in your internal instance of Slack or Slack Connect with your external evangelist of, hey, here's what we're posting, here's what's going on, you're celebrating the wins, that sort of stuff. Just like the screenshot I shared earlier, that should also be, as you see those wins, you should be grabbing those for the quarterly report you're giving to your leadership team on what's working with Nearbound marketing and activating our
That
evangelists.
dirty data, by the way, the self-reported, we have that on our site, and I go through it every couple of weeks, just kind of scanning for trends or interesting things. And then I'll sometimes share a screenshot of like, oh, check it out. We've had 4 people say that, so-and-so referenced them to us. And sometimes that will trigger things where a sales rep will say like, oh, no way, I should reach out to that person. Like maybe it's an existing customer of ours who told somebody. And then just like pulling that out and pulling out those little trends and little specific anecdotes can sometimes like help you start to see more Nearbound plays. If even something as small as going to somebody and being like, hey, somebody mentioned that you told them about us. Thanks so much. How's everything going? Right. Like it's a forcing function, even though it's not, clean data, it's incredibly valuable.
Yep. Absolutely. So then in phase 5 is really about iterating and scaling. As we mentioned, you don't want to go far and wide, even though, like, as we initially listed, what was really encouraging is you have all these potential Nearbound evangelists that you could activate, internal and external. Do not try to activate them all at once. It will flop. You will lose momentum. People will say, I told you so. This personal brand stuff, this evangelism stuff, Nearbound just really doesn't work. Start with a small group who is really willing and bought in, and review the KPIs you're tracking with some of those things we talked about there, both the qualitative and the quantitative. It's also important to get your evangelist feedback, like what's working for them. Maybe they're like, hey, every time we meet and then you're creating this micro content with me, I'm posting these carousels and they're getting twice the reach as the video clips. Let's double down on carousels and do fewer video, or vice versa. Get their feedback. Or maybe they say, hey, this is great. I could actually, you guys are spending some time like writing some of the social copy to go with these clips. I could actually, write it in my tone of voice better. Like, you don't even need to do that. Write 80% of the post thing for me. Spend more time on doing this, right? And then you can figure out some of the efficiencies as you're going. Avoid what's not working, double down on what is. And then you can start to experiment with new content types or channels. Maybe, in a month, we'll be talking about how to activate your evangelist on Threads. I don't know. Right. Right now, I'm just using that as a dumping ground for content ideas and then going to it. And then I turn that into a LinkedIn post. But we'll see. So that's really where, iterating and then starting to scale. And it's very similar to Nearbound sales, right? Like I've heard Jared say, like as a partner manager, and you're trying to get some of your sellers to adopt a Nearbound approach to, work these accounts with a partner, and they do their 3x3 matrix. Don't go to every seller and try and execute that play. Go to 1, go to 2, go to 3. And then on that next QBR, they're raving about how this helped them hit quota, Same thing here. Start with that small group of evangelists, find the wins, and then use that to recruit your other evangelists internally and externally. So it's very similar, Nearbound sales and Nearbound marketing, where you want to start small, build the wins, and then evangelize those wins. You'll start finding yourself evangelizing evangelism. It's very meta, but it is definitely part of the process. So
that is a huge thing. I think it's a great place to end it too. When you get this working, even just one example, it's not enough to be like, there it worked, proof's in the pudding. You really have to call that out and point it and say, check it out. Look at this gong recording. This person mentioned that podcast that we did with that person that we were trying to, this is part of our Nearbound strategy. Oh, hey, check it out. This right here, it worked, right? Like, it's really key to help, and it helps people kind of see it. And then everybody starts to get excited and be bought in. So it is definitely, it's definitely like not enough to say the result was achieved. Point that out, celebrate it, and highlight it. Hey, Logan, this was absolutely awesome. You guys see on here, you can connect with Logan on LinkedIn. Definitely check out the Marketing Together podcast. We got to wrap it because I literally am running to another event right now in like 5 minutes.
Join us over there.
big hype thing for something coming up for the PLX Summit this year. So thanks so much, everybody. As always, we will be back here next week, Wednesday. I actually cannot remember the title, but Sally from our team. Oh, no, actually Jessica, I think, from our team. I think it's Jessica is running the session next week, same time, same place, Wednesday at noon, Nearbound at Work every single week. Logan, you are the man. Thanks. And we'll see everybody later.
Thanks, everybody.